You could increase the age pension by 20%. You could make it universal, so everybody got one at the age of 67 when they retired. So everybody from the poorest person to the richest person. Gina Reinhardt would get a full age pension, 20% larger than now. And you would still have tens of billions of dollars left over after you did that if you funded it by getting rid of all of superannuation tax concessions. So we can give everybody a universal age pension and still save money simply because superannuation tax concessions are so large.
That's just how enormous they are.
Yep.
Wow.
One for Mum, one for Dad, and one for the country.
And there has never been a more exciting time to be an Australian.
Budgets are about choices, Fran, and you show what you value through the choices you make.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared.
The Treasurer knows I want an economy that works for people, not the other way around.
We'll just end up being a third-rate economy, a banana republic.
Just follow the money.
G'day, and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast that explains big economic issues in plain English. I'm Ebony Bennett, Deputy Director at the Australia Institute, and when it comes to big economic issues, it doesn't get much bigger than superannuation tax concessions. Australia's super funds have trillions of dollars in funds under management, and superannuation tax concessions are one of the biggest expenditures listed in the budget. Treasurer Jim Chalmers recently announced modest changes to the superannuation tax concession system, which sent the media into a frenzy, to say the least.
The biggest overhaul of Australia's superannuation industry in more than 3 decades.
Turning now to the looming showdown on superannuation, the Prime Minister has announced...
Talking about the party on super, has it all come to an end, Johnny?
And Labor did not go to the election with any of this on their policy platforms.
The point is, you said it wasn't going to happen, and now you're saying it is going to happen. That's a broken promise.
The government poised to slash tax concessions for those who've got millions in super.
Doubling the tax rate for people with super balances above $3 million.
You're starting to raid our superannuation. What's next?
Warning, this tax hike could impact 500,000 Aussies.
This is franking credits on steroids. This is going to attack everybody. It destroys the entire bargain of superannuation.
The government has been accused of bungling the modelling for its plan to put a 30% tax on super balances above $3 million.
It's our money in a super fund, and maybe I'm silly, I would just want the best return.
Superannuation is supposed to help us save for retirement, and tax concessions on super are meant to reduce the burden on the government to fund our retirement through the age pension. But what are these tax concessions, and are they really working in the way they're intended to? To help explain, I'm talking today to Senior Economist Matt Grudnoff and Senior Research Fellow at the Australia Institute, Dave Richardson. G'day, Matt. G'day, Dave.
G'day.
Hello.
So to start at the beginning, Dave, you released a paper just a few weeks ago that looked at the total cost of superannuation tax concessions. What did that paper show?
It showed that total superannuation tax concessions this financial year will be $53 billion, and that's a big number. People aren't used to thinking in that many billions. But to put it in context, it's effectively the third biggest program that the federal government runs, and it's bigger than the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme. And most people would be aware that that's a big scheme, and there's lots of fears generated about whether we can continue to afford NDIS.
And it's not far behind the total cost of providing the age pension, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, there's only a cigarette paper in it, roughly, given that, these things, we only have estimates, and they tend to be very rubbery.
One of the things that the Treasurer was keen to point out was that we're going to spend more on superannuation tax concession than the aged pension by 2050.
Healthcare or aged care or disabilities or defence spending, but especially the interest costs on that $1 trillion of debt that we inherited from our predecessors.
The savings that are made from the reduction in these tax breaks will contribute $900 million to the bottom line over the forward estimates, and some $2 billion when it is operating on a full year period.
And Matt, what exactly are super tax concessions and why is superannuation taxed concessionally?
Yeah, so a tax concession is basically the government saying to somebody, you can pay less tax than you otherwise would be. So if you earned an income, you'd pay your marginal tax rate. Obviously, if you earned more, you'd pay a higher marginal rate. If you earned less, you'd pay a lower marginal rate. But if you were earning money in a super fund at the moment, you would only pay 15 cents in the dollar. To put that in context, that's less than most people would earn on their income. So the moment you get above $45,000 a year, you're actually paying more than 30% rather than 15%. So, and the reason we do this basically is so that it encourages people to put money into their super fund, and it encourages that super fund to grow in the hope that people will be less reliant on the age pension when they retire.
And so, Dave, if we look at the whole superannuation system at the moment, these super tax concessions, who are they benefiting the most?
Oh, there's no doubt. They're benefiting the top end of town, the very wealthy. There's something like 800 odd super funds in Australia that earn concessions on income of $1 million per annum. That $1 million is treated concessionally. So instead of being taxed at 47% or whatever their marginal tax might be, it's only taxed at 15%.
So basically, the more you earn and the more you're contributing into super, the bigger the benefit from tax concessions you get.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, talking about our general system of retirement support based on superannuation and the age pension, an indicator of the problems with our system is that among the countries in the OECD that we like to compare ourselves with, we have the second highest poverty rate of those 66 and above.
Yeah. So the system's not really delivering well at the moment.
No, it's very, very good if you've got heaps, you set up your own self-managed super fund. That's where most of the rorting appears. You'd be hard-pressed to justify having, tens of millions in a fund saying, this is for a comfortable retirement.
Yeah.
The average superannuation balance is about $150,000. And the few people with balances above $3 million hold an average of almost $6 million in their accounts.
17 people earning over $100 million, having over $100 million in their superannuation accounts. The individual who has over $400 million in his or her account. Most Australians would agree that that's not what superannuation was for.
Why do you need more than $3 million? And how do you even get $3 million into there to start with? This is a generous tax concession to a relatively small number of people.
So, Matt, if these tax concessions are supposed to or meant to help reduce reliance on the aged pension, how much are they actually helping the people that need the most to help?
Well, they're not. They're not helping the people. So let's look at it like this. So if we take the bottom 10% of income earners, they're most likely to be on a full age pension, okay? And if we look at the average cost of an age pension, if we give somebody a full age pension over their entire lifetime, it's going to be about $300,000. Now, if we look at the top 10%, they're not going to get any age pension, right? There's no chance that they will ever be on the age pension. Their assets are just too large. But if we look at how much we're helping them with their retirement income, it's not with an age pension, it's with super tax concessions. And over their lifetime, we're going to give them over $600,000. So twice as much as what it would cost to put them on a full age pension, or twice as much as people at the bottom. So there's no such thing as a self-funded retiree. There are just some people who get their support from the government through the age pension. That's poorer people. And there are some people at the very top who get all of their support from tax concessions. But they're both getting support from government. And at the moment, what we're doing is we're giving most of our support to the people at the very top and less support to people at the bottom, which is exactly the opposite of what you'd expect if the government was trying to help people with their retirement incomes.
And so, Matt, keeping with this idea, Treasurer Jim Chalmers has recently announced some changes to superannuation tax concessions. What are they?
Basically, he's changed the size of the tax concession on your earnings. So if you've got a chunk of money in super, your superannuation firm, or if you're a self-managed super fund yourself, they'll go out and they'll invest it, all right? And it'll earn an income. So those investments will earn an income, and that's an income stream. And he's changing how much tax we pay on that income stream. But not for most people. In fact, not for the vast majority of people. Not for 99.5% of people. It'll remain exactly the same. What we're talking about is the top 0.5%, or people with a super fund above 3 million. And the change is, rather than those earnings being taxed at 15 cents in the dollar, all the earnings above 3 million will be taxed at 30 cents in the dollar. So they still get a superannuation tax concession, it just gets a bit smaller.
It's just slightly less generous.
That's right. So if I was handing you money, if you had a $3 million or say $6 million super fund, and I'm handing you big wads of cash, and after this change, I might halve the size of the wad of cash that I'm giving you. So I'm still giving you tax concessions. I'm still adding to your enormous super pile.
Yeah.
I'm just adding to it at a smaller rate.
So to be clear, if you were earning this money as a wage or a salary, you have a marginal income tax that would be much higher than what you pay on earnings in super. That's a deliberate design feature, and we're not changing that. You still get a tax concession. It's just slightly less generous than it was before. Is that a good summary?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
The government has received overwhelming public support for its new superannuation tax plan. That's according to the latest news poll out today.
News poll, 64% have approved the changes. Interestingly as well, a majority of coalition supporters also approved the changes.
Tough conversations had around solid marble dining room tables this morning, aren't there? I mean, are they going to have to sell the second or third Mercedes, maybe even downgrade to an Audi or a VW? I mean, Winters and Whistler, they're not going to pay for themselves. It's tough.
It's not
tough
easy.
On the streets of Double Bay.
It's not easy.
So, probably not a surprise then that News Poll Dave showed that 2/3 of voters are backing the government on this, because it really only impacts quite a small number of people.
It does. And look, I've got some figures on that. Some commentators are trying to say, well, $3 million is not that much. Good luck to them.
I certainly don't have $3 million in my super, nor will I ever approach $3 million in my super.
On my calculations, somebody who's retiring and they've been in the workforce for 40 years on average weekly earnings, whatever those average weekly earnings were over their working life, had they been lucky enough to have their employer help with contributions so that they were putting away 10% of their income for all that period, and they earned 6% after tax on those contributions, then they have $670,000 at retirement, which is, quite a little nest egg.
It's not $3 million though, is it?
No. To make up $3 million, you need 4.5 of those average weekly earners.
4.5.
Yep. Or somebody that is currently making $421,000 per annum prior to retirement.
Wow. So that's not really your everyday Australian that you're talking about there, is it?
No. And people don't accumulate those sorts of funds working normal jobs.
Yeah.
And the reason we know this for sure, right, is because this change only affects 0.5%. We talk about the 1%, the richest 1%. No, it doesn't affect the 1%. It's the 0.5%. Like, it's half of that. So, obviously normal people don't accumulate these kind of amounts because only a tiny proportion of the population has ever managed it.
Yeah, I saw an amazing tweet from the ABC journalist Matt Bevan, and he said that he had calculated that if he doubled his income immediately, stayed on that amount for the next 32 years, and on top of that, made at least $70,000 a year in voluntary contributions, he could almost get to $3 million. Yep. So it's actually quite hard to do.
It's very difficult to get that amount. And look, the previous Turnbull government basically made it even harder. They made restrictions about how much contributions you can make. So, successive governments have basically tried to tighten these rules, and this is just the latest tightening of the rule.
Yeah. So, just to be clear, Labor's not novel in trying to change some of the ways that we concessionally tax super, or the way that super works. You're saying as recently as 2016, the coalition government did the same thing.
Yeah, basically they restricted, or they put caps on how much you could put into your super every year. And that the purpose, the reason they put that cap in, Angus Taylor at the time said, because it was outrageous that people with millions and millions of dollars in their super were getting all of these tax concessions.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt that superannuation is very generous in some respects.
Fast forward to today, Angus Taylor, who's now the shadow Treasury spokesperson, is very happy to try and protect people with millions and millions of dollars in their super. It was outrageous in 2016 and it's outrageous today.
Yeah, we agree with 2016 Angus Taylor.
Yeah, not 2023 Angus Taylor.
Australians want to have confidence that these very long-term investments aren't going to be played with by government. It's not the government's money, it's their money.
We will block them in the Parliament.
Frankly, I don't care whether people have got a small or a big balance in their superannuation. The fact is that they worked hard for it. It's their money. They sacrificed to put that money into a superannuation account, and they did it according to the law, Peter. They've been, I think, just completely and utterly dudded by this government.
The other thing that the Treasurer has announced is that he wants to legislate an objective for super. Haven't we had one this whole time?
Yeah, it's kind of really weird, right? We've had compulsory superannuation, since the 90s. Keating introduced it in the 90s, so about 30 years ago. And we actually don't know what super's for. So earlier I said superannuation was to take pressure off the age pension, and that's what most people assume, right? But that's not actually legislated, and it's not clear that that's exactly what it's for. And because of that, there are a whole heap of people out there who are saying, well, because super doesn't have an objective, then it's quite reasonable for me to use super to try and reduce my taxable income.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of really rich people out there who that's their purpose. So to be clear, there is one person with over $500 million, $500 million in their super, right? Now, obviously, putting that amount of money, you could never spend that amount of money in your retirement, right?
Yeah.
It's clearly a way of avoiding tax and passing on money to your heirs, to the people after you. And because we don't have a purpose for super, maybe that's okay. But if we legislate a purpose for super, then at least we can craft our super rules around that purpose, rather than it being used just as a way of avoiding tax.
And presumably we need to legislate this purpose because, other people disagree on it. The coalition thinks it's quite okay to raid your super to pay for all kinds of things, including at one point fleeing domestic violence. I think there was a proposal for women to be able to access their super to flee. But this idea that we can just dip in, that's what we're trying to avoid, right? Super, we tax it concessionally because it's for retirement. So we're defeating the purpose if we let you dip into it all the time. Is that right, Dave?
Absolutely, absolutely. And what does it say about us as a society? If you want to escape domestic violence, you have to mortgage your retirement.
Yeah, or to afford a house. You've got to choose between a dignified retirement or buying a house.
And that's the big one that the coalition government came up with at the last election. And this one is the most crazy of all, of course, because if first home buyers or people can dip into their super in order to help fund a house, what's going to happen? Well, all the house prices are going to go up, right? The same people will be able to afford a house, they'll just pay more, and then you'll have a mortgage, but you won't have anything left in your super. And so, it's a lose-lose basically. But sort of people think, well, if I had access to my super and nobody else did, then yes, I would get ahead in the property market. But if everybody has access to their super, then all I'm doing is showing up to the auction with everybody else having access to their super, and the price is going to go up.
So a little bit like all the other first home buyer schemes, all it does is push up the price of
Exactly
housing.
right. Yeah, look at all those $7,000 and $14,000. All the research later said, surprise, surprise, all it did was push up prices. So if you own a house now, right, an investment property, then you're the biggest winner from first homeowners being able to access their super for housing.
The super industry estimates people who drew down on their super during the pandemic will be $80,000 worse off when they retire, and that as a result, it has added $70 billion to the cost of the pension.
Allowing the early release of superannuation money means that overall, for everyone in the super fund, the long-term returns are going to be lower.
For any government policy, you do need to have a defined purpose. You need it to set the direction of policy, you need it to be an anchor for policy.
Superannuation is to preserve savings and deliver income for a dignified retirement alongside government support in an equitable and sustainable way.
And just to be clear, we've talked about what a modest proposal it is. It's only going to impact half of 1% of the Australian population. None of us here can even dream of accumulating $3 million in our super. But there's other things that Labor could be looking at with superannuation tax concessions. Should the super tax concession reforms stop here?
Absolutely not. No.
Well, to put it in context, the $3 million rule is expected to save a couple of billion per annum.
Yep.
But the total figure is $53 billion. So, we're approaching 4% of that. There's 96% to go.
Yeah, not exactly reining it in.
And the Australia Institute, back about 10 years ago, did a paper where we looked at superannuation tax concessions and the age pension. And we worked out you could increase the age pension by 20%. You could make it universal, so everybody got one at the age of 67 when they retired, or whatever the retirement age was. So everybody from the poorest person to the richest person. Gina Reinhardt would get a full age pension, 20% larger than now. And you would still have tens of billions of dollars left over after you did that if you funded it by getting rid of all of superannuation tax concessions. So we can give everybody a universal age pension and still save money simply because superannuation tax concessions are so large.
That's just how enormous they are.
Yep.
Wow.
Another interesting question here is, why do you need big tax concessions for something that's compulsory for most of us?
Good point. Well, that's all we've got time for. Thanks very much, Matt Grudnoff and Dave Richardson. This episode was recorded live on Tuesday the 7th of March, and things may have changed since recording. You can visit australiainstitute.org.au for all our latest research and content, including our superannuation tax concessions research, and we're on Twitter at the Oz Institute with an AUS. My Twitter handle is Ebony_Bennett with a double N double T. Matt Grudnoff is at Matt Grudnoff. Dave is at Dave RR01, and our producer Jennifer Macy is at Jennifer Macy, with additional editing from Emily Perkins. Our theme music is by Jonathan McFeet from Pulse and Thrum, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. Stay safe out there, and thanks for listening.